Wyoming history, a land carved by shadows and time. Wyoming, quiet, vast, and windswept, holds a history written not only in stone and soil, but in the whispers of those long vanished. It became the 44th star on the American flag on July 10, 1890, but its story began millennia earlier, shrouded in obscurity and awe. This land, ranking as the 10th largest in area among the United States, rests like a forgotten giant in the heart of the Mountain West. Framed by 6 bordering states, Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho, Wyoming's silent plains and ragged peaks have watched centuries pass in near secrecy. At its southeastern edge lies Cheyenne, the state capital, where modernity brushes up against echoes of the frontier past. The earliest footsteps, long before maps etched Wyoming into view, ancient hunters and gatherers stepped across its prehistoric wilderness. More than 20,000 years ago, they crossed from Siberia through Alaska, chasing migrating herds into a land both wild and uncharted. These early people, few in number and wholly dependent on the whims of nature, left behind no cities, no written records. Only scattered artifacts remain, like breadcrumbs on the trail of time. By the time white explorers arrived, no more than 10,000 indigenous people roamed these vast lands. The Shoshone were the dominant group, but their territory overlapped with others: the Arapaho, Crow, Cheyenne, Atsina, Urkara, Nez Perce, Ute, and the Dakota Sioux. Each tribe carried its own legends, secrets, and connection to the earth, a spiritual bond still barely understood by the modern world. The Silent Explorers. In 1743, long before the United States was born, 2 French-Canadian brothers entered what is now Wyoming. François and Louis-Joseph de la Vérendrye, sons of a fur trading dynasty, ventured into the northeast corner of the territory. They were searching for a water passage to the Pacific, an obsession that gripped European explorers. They failed, yet in their failure, they became the first known outsiders to witness the Wyoming frontier. 60 years later, the famed Lewis and Clark expedition bypassed the region by just 60 miles, unknowingly skirting a world that few would soon dare to enter. But John Coulter, one of their own, broke away from the party. Driven by a mysterious pull westward, he ventured deep into northern Wyoming. He hunted, he trapped, and he saw things so strange, geysers, steaming earth, alien landscapes, that few back east believed his tales. The Yellowstone he described sounded like fantasy. Yet Coulter's path would one day guide future pioneers, and his legacy would haunt the legends of Jackson Hole, Yellowstone National Park, and beyond. Fur, steel, and silent trails. Wyoming's transformation begins. In the shadow of jagged peaks and endless sky, the silence of Wyoming was broken, not by settlers, but by whispers of commerce. After the first daring explorers vanished into the mists of memory, a new breed of men arrived. Fur traders, drawn by the lure of wealth hidden in the wilderness. From 1825 to 1840, Wyoming's economy, if it could be called that, was ruled by these wandering spirits. There were never more than 500 fur traders operating here at once, yet their names would echo through frontier legend. Jim Bridger, William Sublette, Jedediah Smith, Thomas Fitzpatrick. These men lived on the edge of survival, their lives dictated by snowmelt, game trails, and danger. But they were only the beginning. As the United States surged westward, Wyoming, once an afterthought on the map, became a vital corridor. The discovery of the South Pass through the Rocky Mountains unleashed a human tide. Between 1841 and 1868, as many as 400,000 immigrants trudged across Wyoming's plains, carving their way toward uncertain futures in Oregon, California, Utah, Montana, and beyond. These were not just travelers. They were dreamers, deserters, and desperate souls escaping the known world. In 1850 alone, over 55,000 crossed this haunted land. On the Oregon Trail, Mormon Trail, Bozeman Trail, and others, following wagon ruts etched into the earth like scars. Their bones scattered and forgotten, still rests somewhere beneath the sagebrush. Then came the riders. Between April 1860 and October 1861, the Pony Express galloped across Wyoming, mailbags slapping against horses under the weight of urgency. Among those daring couriers was a young man who would become myth, William F. Cody, known to history as Buffalo Bill. And behind them all marched the U.S. military. To protect the overland routes, outposts rose from the dust: Fort Laramie, Fort Phil Kearny, islands of order in a sea of uncertainty. But the real rupture came not on horseback, but on rails. The steel invasion. In November 1867, the shriek of a steam engine pierced the still Wyoming air. The Union Pacific Railroad had reached Cheyenne, and with it came destiny. In the blink of a season, a settlement of tents and rough shelters swelled to over 6,000 souls. The land was no longer distant. It was accessible, and it would never be the same. Nearby, a new military post, Fort D.A. Russell, was established just west of Cheyenne. It would later become the Francis E. Warren Air Force Base, but in that moment, it was another symbol of civilization encroaching on the wild. From Cheyenne, the railroad slithered westward, carving through southern Wyoming like a blade, reaching Utah in 1868. Along its path, towns rose and fell. Some survived, others faded into dust and memory. But something deeper had changed. The building of the Transcontinental Railroad turned America's gaze toward the west. What was once forgotten was now vital. And on July 25, 1868, the Wyoming Territory was born, brought forth not by diplomacy or democracy, but by iron, ambition, and the unrelenting march of time. Statehood and shadows. Wyoming's struggle for identity. As the 19th century waned and the Wild West began to settle, Wyoming stood at a crossroads, its lawlessness clashing with the rising current of order. On November 5, 1889, the people of the territory cast their votes, approving a constitution that would soon shock the world. And yet, statehood would not come until 1890, when Wyoming was finally admitted as the 44th state of the Union. But what set Wyoming apart was not just its rugged land or its roaring railroads. It was a revolution, one written quietly into its very foundation. In a move that stunned even the most progressive corners of the nation, Wyoming's constitution granted women full voting rights, the first in the world to do so. Women could not only vote, but hold public office, making Wyoming a frontier not just of geography, but of equality. In 1924, the state's bold spirit struck again. Nellie Taylor Ross was elected governor, the first woman in U.S. history to hold that position. Her victory was not merely political. It was symbolic. It earned Wyoming the enduring title, the Equality State. But beneath these breakthroughs, the land remained restless. The Cowboy Kingdom. In the decades leading up to statehood, Wyoming's cattle industry boomed. Vast rangelands served as the northern end of long, dusty cattle drives from Texas. Out of this grew a culture of independence and conflict. This was the birth of the cowboy era, later immortalized in Owen Wister's 1902 novel, The Virginian. The story, drawn from Wister's time in Wyoming, painted a romantic portrait of frontier life. But behind the myth, violence simmered. Cattlemen, homesteaders, and sheep herders battled for dominance, their disputes fueled by dwindling resources and blurred land boundaries. Gunfire on the open range was not uncommon. These weren't isolated skirmishes. They were part of a larger war being fought across the American West, a fight for control, for survival, and for the future of the frontier. Boom, bust, and the war on the plains. As the 20th century dawned, Wyoming began to change once again. Between 1900 and 1920, its population nearly doubled, reaching 194,531. The driving force? Oil. The dusty town of Casper became the heart of this new industry. Wells were drilled. Fortunes were made. But nothing lasted forever. The Great Depression struck Wyoming like a winter storm. Oil and coal prices collapsed. Jobs vanished. Families fled. What had seemed like the start of prosperity gave way to silence again. but help arrived from an unlikely place, the New Deal. Civilian Conservation Corps crews worked deep in the forests, building trails and shelters. Others turned their efforts to engineering. Projects like the Kasparov Project, later renamed the Kinder Project, brought irrigation and electricity by damming the North Platte River. Farmland flourished, and the state found new lifeblood in the rivers once only crossed by wagons. Still, even politics reflected this push and pull. Democrats surged in the 1934 elections, only to lose control to Republicans by 1938, a pattern of fleeting change beneath Wyoming's enduring conservatism. Boom, bust, and beyond. Wyoming's journey into the modern age. In the aftermath of World War II, the winds that once whispered over Wyoming's plains carried something new: opportunity. The state, long shaped by cattle, coal, and conflict, entered an era of modest growth and economic expansion. Agriculture endured, but it was the depths of the land that promised something more. Then, in 1951, beneath the quiet soil of the Powder River Basin, prospectors unearthed a mineral that would shape global politics for decades to come: uranium. As the Cold War intensified, Wyoming's newly discovered reserves became critical to the U.S. nuclear arsenal, its silent power hidden beneath ancient ground. The 1960s brought smoke and steel. Coal-burning power plants and steel foundries rose like monoliths against the open sky. Oil surged once again, and Wyoming's once distant name became associated with the engines of modern industry. The energy rush and the vanishing crowd. By the 1970s, Wyoming stood on the brink of transformation. An energy boom swept the state like wildfire, fueling rapid population growth. From 1970 to 1983, the population increased by nearly 50%. Per capita income soared, briefly placing Wyoming among the wealthiest states in the nation. But prosperity born of the earth is never permanent. In mid-1980s, an oil glut struck the global market. Prices collapsed, drilling halted, and Wyoming's economy, soaring just years earlier, crashed into recession. Towns emptied, families moved away. What remained was the silence of another bust, etched into the state's long pattern of economic rise and fall. Mountains, movies, and modernization. Yet even as oil rigs slowed, a different kind of traveler arrived. High in the Tetons, in Jackson and its neighboring towns, the snow whispered a new promise: recreation. Since the late 1940s, ski lodges had begun to dot the landscape. By the end of the century, Jackson Hole had transformed into a haven for winter sports and for wealth. Celebrities and investors, many from Hollywood, began purchasing second homes in the area. With them came influence, attention, and money. Tourism, once an afterthought, now became a pillar of Wyoming's economy. Wyoming in the 21st century. Today, Wyoming walks the line between legacy and change. Its Western heritage remains intact, seen in rodeos, ranches, and rural towns where time moves slowly. But beneath that surface, the foundation has shifted. Mining and service industries have overtaken cowboy life. The state still draws strength from its vast reserves of coal, oil, natural gas, and uranium. But these blessings bring risk. As the world market fluctuates, Wyoming rides the storm of economic unpredictability, boom and bust, again and again. Efforts to diversify the economy have had success, especially through tourism and outdoor recreation, yet the heart of Wyoming still beats to the rhythm of the land. It is a place forged by frontiers, fueled by resources, and forever shaped by the tension between wildness and civilization. If this journey through Wyoming's shadowed past stirred your curiosity, don't stop here. Subscribe to History Love for more untold stories, legendary figures, and cinematic deep dives into the forces that shaped our world. Like, share, and drop a comment below. What part of Wyoming's history surprised you the most? Join us next time as we uncover another corner of history where mystery, myth, and truth collide.